What is up, everyone? I miss you guys. I hope you're doing well. I cannot wait for the day when we are able to meet together again. I'm praying that that day will be someday soon. I have enjoyed being able to connect with you guys in different ways through social media, things like that. So even tonight, be on the lookout for another game on our Instagram and Facebook stories. You're going to want to be a part of that. The winner of the contest tonight, of course, will be getting a pretty cool prize tomorrow afternoon, so you're going to want to be a part of that, and I hope you will be. So just make sure you're looking out for that. And I am especially bummed that we can't meet together this week. This is one of my favorite times of the year. I love Easter. Easter is just a few days away, and I love it. Not just because the weather's getting nice and like they're selling Cadbury eggs again and Reese's eggs. Like, those are definitely perks, right? Those are good perks. I had a whole mess of Cadbury eggs last week. But anyways, but no, those aren't the reason I love Easter. I love Easter because of the reason we celebrate Easter, right? The resurrection of King Jesus. Guys, I get so excited about this. This is one of my favorite things to talk about and teach about. And so I get real fired up. And so that's what I want us to look at tonight. We're going to be looking at a passage out of John chapter 11. That's pretty exciting. So I hope that you will join me for that. So let's go ahead and open up to John chapter 11. This is not actually the story about Jesus' resurrection like you might think. This is the story about Jesus raising someone else from the grave. A guy named Lazarus. This is one of Jesus' best friends. And so this is kind of a long passage, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. Instead, I want you to pause this video right now and go read the entire chapter of John 11. Okay, John chapter 11, read the whole thing, pause this video, go read it, and then press play again and we'll talk through it together. Okay, so press pause now. All right, welcome back. Okay, welcome back. I hope you've read John chapter 11, and so let's go through it together. So just to quickly recap this, we picked up in John chapter 11, and Jesus finds out that one of his friends, Lazarus, is very sick. And so, this is one of his closest friends. But oddly, Jesus decides to wait a couple days before he goes. And so then, he tells his disciples, hey, Lazarus is dead. Let's go ahead and head that way. And we're going to go wake him up. And so that was a little confusing for the disciples, right? We probably would have been confused by that as well. But they're like, okay, so let's go. So they went to Bethany, which is a town just outside of Jerusalem. And that's where Lazarus and his family were. And so that's where they headed. So verse 17 tells us that by the time Jesus got there, Lazarus' body had already been in the tomb for like 4 days. This is a significant amount of time, right? And we see in verse 39 that his body is already kind of starting to decompose. I point this out because I never read the King James version a whole lot. I grew up on the NIV or whatever, but I remember distinctly reading in the KJV when I was a little kid, verse 39 here, where Martha tells Jesus, Lord, if you go in there, he stinketh, right? So I always thought that was awesome, and I've never forgot it. But basically what John is trying to get across here is that Lazarus is dead, like for sure dead. He is dead, and he stinketh, okay? He stinketh right now. So John just trying to get that point across, like this dude is dead, okay? And so then, John kind of writes about this exchange with Martha and Jesus. Martha, of course, starts off, she's a little frustrated with Jesus. She says, hey, if you'd been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died. But then she kind of immediately, regains her composure and says, but hey, I know that whatever you ask of God will be given to you, right? So she was a little upset at Jesus that he had not come when they first sent for him, but she understands that Jesus has purposes beyond what we may know. And so Jesus then responds to her and says, Lazarus will rise again. I think here Martha kind of assumes that he's talking about the last days, because she even mentions that. She mentions the last day. But actually, Jesus here is talking about something even bigger than that. He then tells her, I am the resurrection. I am the life. So notice, Jesus doesn't say, I can resurrect people. I can resurrect Lazarus, and I have life. No, he says, I am resurrection and I am life. Our hope is not in any event, but it is in the person of Jesus, right? Nothing can hinder Jesus from giving life, because he doesn't have life. Jesus is life. And this is just one of the ways that Jesus is different from you and I, right? I have life, you have life, but Jesus is life. We can lose our life, but Jesus can never lose his life, because he is life, and he willingly laid down his life. But his resurrection was the proof that death couldn't take that life from him. Jesus here is making a promise that goes way beyond what he's about to do for Lazarus. What he does with Lazarus kind of proves that he can keep the promise that he makes, right? He promises that those who believe in him will never have to worry about death. Those that believe in him will spiritually never die. Even if we physically die, we'll never spiritually die. And so, we believe as Christians that he is the Son of God, that he came into the world just as he promised to rescue us from death. And so, we know that he is the only one we can trust with our lives. And so that's why we give our lives to him. And so Martha responded to that with faith, and then she goes to get Mary. And Mary almost gives us an exact word for word, recap of what Martha just said. She said, hey, if you had been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died, right? And this is something that's interesting to me here with Jesus, is his response to this. He responds with compassion. He knew already what he was going to do for Lazarus. He knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knew that he was going to take the pain away from Martha and Mary here. But he still, entered into that grieving process with them. He still grieved with them. He still showed compassion to them. And this is remarkable to me, because Jesus is going to do something that takes away that suffering. But before he fixes the problem, he joins into that suffering with them. He weeps with them. He shows compassion to them. And I think, this is another thing that we can learn from Jesus is how to weep with people, how to, grieve with people. So often, we try to shy away from those things. We try to shy away from people's hurts and pains. But Jesus entered into grief with people. He openly grieved with them. And so after he grieved with them, that's when he moves to end that grief. And so it stands to reason for us to think, well, like, why did Jesus do that? Why did he let this happen? Why did he let them grieve so long if he was just going to raise Lazarus from the dead? And he knew that. And I think Jesus does things that we will never understand. Like, we'll never be able to grasp it. We will never be able to fully understand, but we can never doubt, his love for us, his desire for us to experience him and his glory. And he calls for us to trust him. And I think in this instance, Jesus is, the purpose of this is to do something bigger than just removing the grief away from Lazarus's family, right? What he's going to do here is so much bigger than that. This miracle was not about just removing the grief from that family. This miracle was about Jesus's power over death. And Lazarus's family had like a front row seat, right? I imagine this like duel between Jesus and death. Like it's like a boxing match, right? We have this boxing match here between Jesus and death. In their corners, they're getting ready to ring the bell, and Lazarus and his family are right there on the front lines of this. Yeah, make sure you cough into your elbow. Okay, stay safe out there, folks. But anyways, and it's amazing to me that this story just ends. It's kind of anticlimactic, right? So after this happens, Jesus calls out to Lazarus, "Hey, Lazarus, come out here," and he does, and then boom, that's the end of the story. That's it. You would think that they'd have more to say about that, but no, that was it. That's the end of the story. And I think that's because the writer here understands that this was not a fair fight. This death was outmatched here. This was, an overmatch, right? Death was outmatched the day Jesus was born. And this was not a fair fight. And so, we see Lazarus step out of the tomb here. And then just a few chapters later in John, we see an even bigger resurrection. If this, raising Lazarus was kind of Jesus's first punch, right? And then a few chapters later, Jesus's own resurrection was the knockout blow. Okay, death had no chance. All right, Jesus is life. Death never had a chance. There's so much hope in this passage. It's unreal. Because up until this point, death had always had the final word, right? It had the upper hand. Death had the final word. When you died, that's it. There was no hope in that. That was it. That was the end of it. But no more. Jesus has the final word. Death doesn't have the final word anymore. Jesus has the final word. And his final word is, "I am the resurrection. I am the life." And that is why we can have hope. And his raising Lazarus from the dead was just the looking forward to his own resurrection that was even greater, and even gives us even more hope that he keeps his promises. He is who he says he is. Okay, this is why we have hope. The resurrection is why we have hope. Jesus said, "I am the resurrection. I am life." And that is why we can have hope. And so, guys, I just thank you so much for watching this tonight. I am praying for you guys every day. I love you guys. Please feel free to reach out to me if you need anything or just want to talk or whatever, man. I am here for you guys. And so, I hope we can see each other soon. Again, feel free to reach out to me if you ever need anything, and I will see you soon. Thank you.
From now on, you can count me Lazarus. From now on, you can count me Lazarus.